everyone, Adrian from Audio Excellence Canada. Hope you're doing well. Sorry, my friend Philip won't be able to join us today. He is moving. So it's just me today and Angus behind the controls. Today we're going to do the part one of a multi-part series on the Wilson XVX speakers, which are behind me. We've done two videos on the XVX so far. One was the uncrating and the other one was the installation. And Angus will link to those videos in the description box. So I thought that I would do more follow-up videos about what the XVXs are. They're so involved and sophisticated that I didn't think that making one long video would make sense. So we'll do just a few multi-part ones. So here we go.
All right, so what's the history of Wilson Audio and how did you come to know the company?
Okay, I've got my cheat sheet here because there's a lot and I would forget if I didn't have my sheet, so I'll refer to it. Wilson Audio was founded in 1974, originally selling LPs. I first heard of David Wilson when I found this magazine called The Absolute Sound, and he was one of the staff writers at the time. What I found interesting was while I enjoyed the writing of a lot of the staff writers, and Harry Pearson in particular, I found I related to David Wilson's writings because he was very precise, very methodical, and he would also include pictures and graphs of what he was trying to say. So for example, if he described that the soundstage seemed truncated towards the end or at the end of the stage, he would draw what he meant. And so for example, if the edges, the left and right edges were foreshortened, he would draw that. And that really helped me, especially if you think back in the 80s, high-end audio as an industry was still very young, and the lexicon, the words that we use today that we take for granted were still not necessarily understood by readers or even among the different editors and writers. So that really helped a young budding audiophile like myself to understand what he heard and what he was trying to say. Then in 1988 or 89, I bought my first pair of Wilson speakers back then. It was called the Watt, W-A-T-T, Wilson Audio Tiny Tot. And I bought them with the rosewood sides. I still have very fond memories of those speakers to this day. They weighed 50, 60 pounds each, tremendously heavy, very dense. They were absolutely incredible in comparison to speakers of that time, even many that were very well known and highly regarded. These speakers threw an image and soundstage that was like no other. While they did not have the height, for example, of a very tall speaker or obviously deep bass, they were very precise, and I could hear things in recordings that other very highly regarded speakers just couldn't do. And then at the time I was working for a store called American Sound, and Angie and her husband had sold a pair of the WAMs. So I had the tremendous pleasure of helping David Wilson install the speakers. And I remember quite clearly to this day how methodical and consistent he was in the setup process. Everything was by the book. He had developed this protocol so that nothing would be left to chance. The tools that he brought, the notes that he kept. He started by finding the zone of neutrality, a process that every authorized Wilson dealer has been trained to do. So if you buy a pair of Wilson speakers from a Wilson dealer, the dealer will go through this. And essentially what that does is find the zone in your room that has the most neutral mid-range reproduction. And then within that zone, you would place the speakers and get the best dynamics and bass possible. So he did that, and then we assembled the speakers, placed the speakers in the zone, and then the voicing process started. A couple of interesting stories. Just before he started doing the voicing, the client came downstairs and told him that he had a phone call from his wife, Cheryl Lee. David said to the client, please tell her that I'm just about to start my voicing process and she'll understand. And the client went back up and told her that. David turned to me and said, I found that if I'm just about to do my voicing process and I take a call, that call will change how I hear and how I reference or what to reference my sound against. So even though he knew his wife's voice very intimately, the problem is that by hearing her voice through telephone, it would disrupt his methodology and his process, so he wouldn't take the call. The other interesting aside was he told me a story about how they met while we were setting up the speakers. David Wilson, while in university, had acquired a great reputation as being a very, very good recording engineer. And Cheryl Lee was a trained singer and wanted to record her voice, her singing voice, for her boyfriend and send him the tapes. So she sought David out to do the recording for her. And David told me that it was love at first sight. He was absolutely smitten with her and started scheming how he could win her over. So that's some basic background behind how we got started with Wilson, or how I found out about Wilson Audio.
So when exactly did we become Wilson dealers?
I guess it was about 1995 or 96. By then, I'd already owned maybe 2 or 3 pairs of the Wilson speakers, and I was a huge fan. Unfortunately, we had just been in business by then for about 4 or 5 years and certainly didn't have the money to be a dealer. And we didn't have the reputation either. We had become a Krell dealer and had started to do very well with Krell. And my agent, Steve, in 95, 96, thereabouts, had started working for Wilson Audio and came to visit me and said, how would you like to be a dealer? And of course, I jumped all over the opportunity to do so. Right around then, Wilson Audio had released the Generation 1 of the X1 Grand Slams. And I'm shocked to this day how many pairs we sold. They're big, very heavy speakers. And the genesis behind these speakers, from what I understand, is that David Wilson, for every pair of WAMs that are sold, David would have to personally go and set them up and install them and voice them, which is obviously a lot of work. It meant that he had to travel a lot, and it also meant that it would disrupt his other responsibilities as a president and CEO of Wilson Audio. So he designed a speaker that would be simpler, easier to set up, but that would give a very large measure of performance similar to the WAMs, and then be able to teach the setup protocol to his dealers. And that's what he did with the Grand Slams. A dealer could bring the speakers to your home, set them up, and get amazing results that were quite close to what the WAMs could do for substantially less money, and also take up a lot less space, because the WAMs are a 4-enclosure speaker system, whereas the Grand Slam essentially just left and right. What's also interesting is that if you look at pictures of the WAM, you will see that there are multiple modules, and each one of those modules can be adjusted forward and back, and also up and down to some degree. With the Grand Slams, that same modularity and adjustment was maintained. And if you look at speakers from Wilson today, from the Sasha DAW on up, they all have that adjustment capability. And so by being able to adjust it, the speakers could be optimized for your height and the distance from the speakers. So one interesting story that just comes to mind, I guess it would have been about summer. One summer afternoon, I saw 3 black Mercedes S600s, I believe they were. They were coupes, if I remember correctly, pull into our driveway parking lot, and then out comes four, um, all dressed in black. I guess they would have been about late 20s, men walking towards us. And my first thought was, oh my God, you know, they look like mafia. And I didn't know what to expect. Turned out that these clients, well, they became clients, were some of the nicest people I've ever met. And they're from Russia. So you might remember back in the late 90s, perestroika, where the USSR essentially disintegrated and capitalism took hold in Russia. And my clients had started to do very, very well and emigrated to Canada and were building homes and wanted the very best audio system possible. And so we talked about the Wilsons, we talked about the Krells, and this particular client said, okay, let's do it. And so that started the process of helping him design his room, um, uh, everything from start to finish, getting the acoustics of the room done. Still to this day, one of the nicest sounding rooms I've ever been in. And what a pleasure to have been a part of setting up that system. So, Dima, hi.
All right. So, what led you to buy the XVXs?
Mm. Um, Ever since I heard the very first pair of whams, that sound stuck in my mind. That effortlessness, that palpability, the sensation of a singer being in front of me in the room. Um, the piano that David played, his own recording, Ragtime Razzmatazz, just being suspended between the speakers. Now, lots of speakers can do a very credible or even amazing job of sound staging and imaging, but very few can do life-size images like the Whams did so well. In addition to that, the utter transparency that the speakers did, much like a very, very good pair of electrostatic speakers, but with weight and 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 gravitas that no electrostatic that I've ever heard could do. So that sound stayed in my mind from that time on. And then around 2003, 2004, we sold a pair of Whams, the Generation 7s, and the installation of that speaker again reminded me of how amazing these speakers truly are. So I've always wanted to replicate that sound. And in fact, every system that I've ever tried to set up for myself has always been targeted, if you will, towards that reference level. And I've never succeeded. Over the years, I've heard virtually every top quality speaker system, audio system that I have been able to do. So I go to almost every big show. I've visited lots of clients who've bought all kinds of wonderful systems over the years. And while they all have different strengths, none has ever captured my heart like the Wham did, does. Um, and then around, let's see, around my notes here. Yeah, so around 2018, I was invited to the Wilson factory again, and I didn't know why. I just thought it was just time to visit again. Turns out that David Wilson had finished his magnum opus, the Wham Chronosonic, and that speaker just completely floored me. When I heard it, it at once astonished me, and I was in despair because I knew I would never be able to afford a speaker like this. It was just too much money, uh, too complicated. I didn't have the room for it. But I was also enjoyed thinking that this level of performance was achievable in audio. I'd never heard anything like this. And trust me when I say I've heard um, almost every one of the ones that are available in terms of the competition. Um, so then in 2019, during the Winter CES in Las Vegas, um, a select group of reviewers and dealers were invited to the Wilson suite at the Mirage Hotel. So I went there. Wilson showed some of the new stuff that they had by then. Unfortunately, David Wilson had passed away from his battle with cancer, and Daryl, his son, had been installed as CEO and chief designer. Now, Daryl had, for the last 10, 15 years, been responsible as lead designer for virtually all of the speakers, either directly responsible for the complete project or overseeing different parts of it. So he had been well trained by David to take over the company and design role. And before David passed away, when David was embarking on the WAM project, Daryl was instrumental in helping design the speakers, helping his father do it. So he knew what was involved with the WAM. So anyway, in the 2019 CES, the suite was set up in such a way so that you had the main greeting area suite, and then there was room off to the side. And so when the time came, we were ushered into the side room, and there was the XVX. Now it was passive; it was just showing the speaker. They didn't play it because it wasn't quite yet done. But I was flabbergasted because I thought, oh my God, maybe this will be my opportunity to get close to the WAM, because I'd always wanted, I just couldn't afford it. Anyway, so after the presentation, I immediately went to Daryl and I said, would you give me some time and can I interview you? He said, sure. So after everybody had left, I sat down with him for about an hour or so. Angus will link the video in the description box. So if you like, it's a long interview, but I think well worth watching. We talked about the process, his background, what made him design the XVXs, what's involved in the XVX, and so on. But from that moment on, I knew I would buy a pair. I didn't know how. It's 329,000 US dollars for a pair. It's a lot of money. But I knew I would buy a pair. Fast forward a year later, so 2020, during the pandemic, I said I'm buying a pair, and so that's how we ended up with a pair, and I have absolutely no regrets. In the next video, I'll get into the details of what's involved in the speaker, how it's made in some detail, and then further on we'll get into our sonic impressions of the speaker. Anyway, I hope you like this video. I know it's not the kind of video that we normally do, but I thought I would do this so that for those of you who are interested in the XVXs, you can at least get a bit of an idea of what goes into the background of the speaker, and then perhaps a follow-up will do the Alex V. Anyway, thanks for watching this. If you like the video, please subscribe, thumbs up, share the video, and comments below. We read all your comments, even if we don't necessarily have the time to answer all of them all the time. So again, it's Adrian from Audio Excellence signing off for myself this time. And Philip, wherever you are, I hope the move is going well. I'm just glad I'm not a part of it. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.